Hey friends, welcome to my channel. Let's get crafting. Our DIY is going to be inspiration from this fantastic, adorable Etsy shop that I found online, Teal barn signs. They have the cutest things there, and I wanted to make my own version at a Dollar Tree price. I'm going to link their Etsy shop down below. Go and check them out. They have so many other cute things that you definitely should check out. But what I did was I went online and I created my own printable with some vintage strawberry free images that I found, and I turned them into a printable that is free for all of you down below if you want to make this particular one. Now the Teal barn has so many other cute signs. Go and check them out like I said, but this one I just had to do it. I couldn't help myself. I wanted you all to be able to have this free printable and make one for yourselves for just $1.50. Now that's not including the ink, so make sure you keep that in mind when you're printing this. It could be just a little bit more, maybe like $2.50, but really it's just not that much. And I will say that I did print on cardstock to make the paper a little bit strong and sturdier. So once you've got everything printed out, go ahead and cut it all up and use an X-Acto knife where you need to get into those small spots, and just make sure you cut all the way up to the image that I have put together for you in the free printable that's linked down below. We're going to take a small fine tip brush and some very light gray paint, and we're going to start creating some shiplap lines. Take your time, they don't have to be perfect. I didn't even use any pencil trace lines. I just went over them very lightly with my paint, and once I got them where I liked them, I took some even lighter gray paint, and now I'm dry brushing on just a little bit of texture to make it look like wood. Once you have that, you're going to go ahead and take that printable that you cut out earlier, and you're going to start positioning it on there to the places that you like it. Again, we're going off with the inspiration to show you all how these type of signs are just so doable and so cute to be able to bring into your home. If this is not your thing in making these, you could always purchase them, especially from cute Etsy shops like I linked down below and the inspiration that this came from. But I just love these kind of signs. I think that they bring so much personality into a room, and just they're fun. They're really fun. Once you've got all your letters all in place, you're going to go ahead and start using some Mod Podge, and you're going to start painting some down and then pressing your letters down into it. Make sure you try to get all the air bubbles out. It's going to naturally want to bubble because that's just what happens when you wet cardstock. So just keep playing with it until it's nice and smooth, but take your time to make sure it's down. And once you put it down, keep in mind that you're not going to want to move it again because it can rip that cardstock that you're working with. Now here is a tip. Once you have gotten all of your things glued down on the back side and it comes to sealing it on the front side, you're going to want to take a nice amount of Mod Podge, and you're going to want to make sure that you don't brush over your image too many times. The green and the red is naturally going to want to bleed onto your backing of your cardstock. If that happens, you can wipe it up a little bit if you see it bleeding through, but just be really cautious to put a lot on your brush and try to do as little strokes as possible away from the backing of that foam cord board, because you just want to make sure that it's a nice clean image and it doesn't look like it's bleeding all over the place. So just take your time with this. Have a little wipey on hand. If it does bleed a little bit, you can wipe up where you need to, and just continue to move on until you get all the way across the whole board. Once you've got all of that sealed and done, you're then going to take one of those stickers from the Dollar Tree. I love these number stickers. I know so many of us have them. You're going to go ahead and just take number 5 or whatever you want to charge for your berry patch strawberries, and you're going to go ahead and just seal that with some more Mod Podge. I figure that this is one thing that I wouldn't do a printable for, just because so many of us have those stickers. And then I'm also going to take the really small stickers also from the Dollar Tree, and I'm going to spell out on the bottom and customize my sign different from what the inspiration was, just for the respect of the artist who created this sign over on her Etsy shop. I'm going to put down there fresh fruit daily. I thought that was a really cute thing to put down there at the bottom, but you really could put whatever you want. You could even put your family's name. How cute could that that be to have this in your home? Then, because I decided not to put anything towards the top, customizing it and making it my own, I took off about 2.5 inches from the top, and I just used my X-Acto knife to cut away. Now we're going to start working on the border. This is where we end up saving a ton of money making this sign, because I took another foam core board and I took 2 inches thick and I went the whole length of the board so that I can make these long strips. And these are going to go all the way around our frame. You're going to see here in just a second. But what I'm doing is I'm taking some brown paint, black paint, and white paint, and I'm mixing it together, and I just keep going over it with different strokes, playing with it until I get it to a look that I want it to look, where it kind of matches the inspiration. Make sure you get the sides of it as well as the top, because you don't want to have that white border. People will know right away that it's foam core and not wood. Now here is one more tip about these foam core boards. When you work with Mod Podge, they are going to naturally want to start to buckle, because when that glue dries, it's going to pull tight. So just make sure that you bend it back a little bit to straighten it out. And then here I am with these borders. You can see here that I'm tucking them under, and I'm going to make sure that I have them all nice and aligned. I'm going to add some hot glue on the back side of the poster. This is the easiest way I found to do it. So add the hot glue and then flip the poster over and put it onto that brown border that we created. You're going to do the top and bottom first, and then you're going to do the sides. And I liked doing it this way because that way it just goes on nicely and you don't struggle with these things trying to attach them. So once you've got one side on and you flip it over and do the other side, and you're using a nice amount of hot glue, you're then going to take your craft knife and you're going to cut off those extra tabs that are hanging over. We don't want those parts on there because we want it to make it look, basically like a frame. So go ahead and cut those off, and then before you wash your paintbrush and the paint that we were using earlier for the frames, you can see there where we cut, there is now going to be some exposed parts. So go ahead and just take your brush and lightly tap and paint on those areas, wiping off anything extra that looks like you obviously added more paint. And when it's all done, you can display it somewhere super cute in your home. Our project today is going to be using these printables that I have created for you, 4 of these 11 by 14 frames and some foam core, because our inspiration has come from Pottery Barn. I could not believe that they were charging $521 for these prints. The sizing on the frames is pretty much the exact same, and I'm doing this project for $6. So you're going to take the backing from the frame, you're going to trace it onto some foam core, and you're going to just simply cut out 4 of those. Then you're going to take your frame outside and you're going to spray all 4 of them whatever color you want. I went with a pretty tan taupey color. And then you're going to come back inside while that's drying, cut down some strips of cardstock. I did it where it's 1 by 12 inches long, and then you're simply going to glue a border around your free printable. You could go through the efforts of matting it and cutting out the foam core, but friends, this looks just as good, and people typically cannot tell that it's not an actual store-bought mat. It looks almost exactly the same. So then what you're going to do is you're going to pop your foam core inside the frame, and you're doing it this way so that you have a nice straight print. You're going to go ahead and glue that in, and then once you've got that all straightened out for the 4 art pieces, you're going to take that back out, insert your glass once your frame is dry, and then you're going to put your foam core artwork right back inside. And then on the back, I just used some twine to create a hang-up option. Our next DIY is using the same printable, and it's only because I want you to have another option if the frame idea is not for you. I want you to be able to see that there are so many cool things you can do with a free printable. So what we're going to do, we've seen this a bunch on Pinterest. It's super easy to do. Take some painter sticks, cut them down to the size that you need, and then simply glue your artwork right to it. This costs pennies to make it, and again, you get that high-end, beautiful coastal boho look without having to spend a ton of money. So now a tip that is very important when you're doing these frames, make sure you line up your painter sticks just like you see me doing here. I add one side and then I do the other side, and then I also add on my twine. You want to make sure you line everything up. Funny enough, I actually did the shell upside down, so ignore that part during the reveal, but have fun with this and make your home beautiful. For this DIY, we are going to use some of these cutting mats from the Dollar Tree. There are 2 in a pack, and friends, I love these cutting mats because it gives you the stiffness without it being unable to mold and move around. So these cutting mats are so fantastic to make some really cute home decor stuff. We are going to be making some of these round metal balls that you see a lot in boho farmhouse decor. I even see it in farmhouse decor, a more modern twist to it. I just love them. I think they're so cool, and I figured out that these cutting mats are perfect for it. So what we're going to do is we're going to get our first straight line, and then we're going to just continue to make lines going all the way across. Now I'm doing about I'm going to say a little bit over a ½ inch, not too wide. You don't want it to be too wide. So let's just say like a ½ inch, and you can just kind of play with that as the thickness as you want. But once I've got one cut out, I'm just going to use it as my template to make all the rest. And you can see here that I'm just making a whole bunch of lines using a Sharpie marker because that does not matter. We're going to paint this black at the end. Now you're going to go ahead and take your scissors and you're going to cut them all apart so you have a whole bunch of strips. And once you've got all your strips, I decided to switch over to this purple mat so that you could see it better just because I have a white table. And then you're going to go ahead and start playing around with the thickness and the size of the ball that you would like. Once you figure out the thickness that you want, go ahead and start using your staple to go ahead and staple it all together. Now this is the cool part about this, is that all you need is basically the cutting mat and a staple. And I'm going to make a large ball and a smaller ball for the cost of 50 cents. Now these home decor pieces can run anywhere between $15 to $30 depending on the size of them. And I'm going to make 2 of them for 50 cents because I'm not using both of the mats. I'm using one mat to make a large and a small ball. So for the larger ball, you can see here that I'm taking 2 of the strips, and I'm going to just make sure I staple them on both sides. You want to make sure everything's laying as smooth and flat as possible because if it's not, it's going to cause some bunching. So once you've got the first circle done, you're going to go ahead and start the second, and I just used it to measure around to make sure everything was the same size. And then you're going to need to create a few of these. So you can see here that I've got 3, and I'm just positioning how I want them to be. I'm stapling them in place. And I will say that as you go further and further and the more you keep adding on to it, it can be a little bit trickier to staple it. But don't be afraid of this project, because if it does have an issue, you just pull the staple back out if it gets a little crimped and it doesn't go all the way through, and then you can just keep repositioning it until you get a nice clean punch all the way through and it's nice and in place. So you can see here that I had a little bit of an issue with that, and it was just playing with it until I got the motion of it. And then it's funny because the first one that I did, I struggled a little bit more, but by the second one, I felt like I had learned what I was doing and I was really jamming through the smaller one. It was much easier for me to make it. So once you've got those 3 crossing circles, the sphere, You're now going to take a long one and you're going to go around the middle part just like I'm doing here to connect it all together. And at this point it's ready to be taken outside. You can spray paint it whatever color you want. You could do silver and do a galvanized look to it, but I decided to go with black because, like I said, I just love that modern farmhouse look for this particular project. Now for the smaller ones, I'm going to take those original existing strips and I'm actually going to cut them in half. So now they're more of a 1/4 of an inch thick. And I'm going to add on my circles. We're going to repeat the same exact process. Now you can put as many circle loops as you would like to create your circle. I decided on this one to do 4 because I thought that that would look really nice, being that it's smaller and I wanted to have more detail to it. But once you basically have gotten them all the way around and stapled, you're then going to take your outer strip, just like we did on the big one, and we're going to staple that into place. So just make sure you take your time, make it look as straight as you possibly can, sneak your staple in there wherever you can, and then just tighten it. And when you're done, take them outside and spray paint them, and you can display them in your home. Super cute. This inspiration came from Antique Farmhouse. I loved these flower containers, but I would not, again, pay the price. So I'm going to use some of these containers from the Dollar Tree, and I created a printable for you all. It's linked down below in my description box. Now you're going to simply start by just taking off the twine that they glued on. And I will tell you that the twine that they glue onto these buckets are very sticky, so you could use some Goo Gone. I got impatient and I actually had another way I knew I was going to be able to fix that problem. So I spray painted my buckets all white, and then I came in with some black paint, and I'm going to just go along the edges to give it that enamel look. After I've gone around the top and the bottom, I went ahead and got my printable that I have created for all of you for free. And I'm just going to start to curve the edges so it hugs onto the bucket better. I've just learned over time with using printables on things, I always like to kind of manipulate it towards the shape that I'm going to be sticking it onto. So I went ahead and used some Mod Podge. I stuck it on there really well with a nice thick coat. And I also sealed the enamel black paint around the top and the bottom. Then I'm coming in with a bow to conceal where that sticky stuff was. Like I said, you could use Goo Gone, but I just did not want to do that. I was wanting to make sure that, you know, everything was super easy for you all to do, especially if you're new crafters. Then I went ahead and just tied a knot, and I kind of manipulated the bow a little bit to glue it in place. And then after I got it to where I liked it, I went ahead and took my scissors and I cut off a dovetail on the ends to create a really pretty bow. I actually love mine even more than the inspiration because the bow just really added something extra to it. For this DIY, the inspiration came from a $299 wreath. I ended up picking up some of these florals from the Dollar Tree, one of their largest wreath forms. I think it's 24 inches. I got one of these long garlands from Hobby Lobby, and well, it's not a coupon anymore, but it was half off, so it was $12.99. And then you can see some of these picks I had on hand. I'm just going to use some little sprigs here and there. And then I actually used 4 packs of these lemons. And then I didn't show it, but I had 2 long skewer sticks, and that's why the price was driven up on this wreath. But again, it's still so much more affordable than what the inspiration was. So now I'm going to take the garland, and this is the greatest way to get greenery around on your wreath. I'm just going to zip tie it all the way around, and I love how this greenery looks, which is why I went with this one. And now I'm going to come back in with these peonies that they had at the Dollar Tree. I'm just going to bring in that wire long enough to be able to loop it around that joint where the zip tie is. And then I'm just going to lock it right into place with some hot glue. Then I come in with some of the, it's kind of like a buttery yellow rose that the Dollar Tree had at the beginning of spring. I really wanted everything to be very light and airy on this wreath. I thought it would be really pretty. Now the inspiration does have a lot more florals, like a buttery yellow rose packed in, but I decided to go a little bit lighter and make it a little bit more my own that I liked for myself. But if you want to copy exactly the inspiration, it would probably push the wreath up to about $30, adding in some more peony roses, and they have some buttery yellow roses as well at the Dollar Tree, so you could definitely add in a little bit more. Then I brought in some daisies and then some of these wispy yellow florals. I thought these were so cute and so dainty, the way that they would just blow in the wind on my front door. And then I brought back in that long floral here that you see me sticking in. I got these at Hobby Lobby a long time ago, and I just am forever like cutting off little stems of it. And I'm just going to add that down in there, and I always like to secure everything with a tiny little dot of hot glue. Now here comes that dowel stick, or the skewer stick, where I'm just cutting it down because I want to make sure my lemons don't fall off of this wreath. So I'm just going to poke it in there and hot glue those into place. That way it has something for the hot glue to lock onto, because these, if you try to put hot glue on the lemons, it's too slick of a surface. It will just come right off over time. So I'm really always a big fan of making sure when you make something, take the time to make sure that it's actually locked into place so that it doesn't pop off. So I put 3 clustered together. Now on the inspiration, you'll see that those are kind of scattered around with the roses, but I really liked this look. And again, just because you find some inspiration doesn't mean it has to look exactly like it. I think that's the fun part about crafting, is you have a jump off point and then you can make it look however you want. So I added on this big bow, and here is the finished look. Look at how much money we saved. These are the supplies we're going to be using for our DIY today. 2 buckets from the Dollar Tree and some vinyl cutouts. Now, this idea came to me from Julie's story. She sent me some inspiration that she really wanted to see turned into a craft from the Dollar Tree. So what we're going to do is we are going to take those buckets and we are going to spray paint the inside a dark gray and then spray paint the outside a light tan. And now at this point, we're going to start bringing in that distressing, that wood texture. So we're going to be dry brushing on 2 different shades of a light tan, and then we're also on the inside as well going to be doing some galvanized distressing inside of it too. Now I want to say to all my friends who are not Cricut owners yet, I don't want you to feel like you're going to miss out on this craft. So what we're going to do is there's going to be a printable down below of the stacked up animals, so you can always cut them out and trace them on or Mod Podge those on. So you'll have some options to be able to play with it. But I do highly recommend, if you could ever save up for one, having a Cricut is so fun because you can just do so many cool things with it. So with that being said, let's get back to our buckets and our projects. So you can see here at this point, I'm now adding in some lighter galvanized shading, and I'm just tapping it. And then at this point, I'm now going to take a small brush and go along the edge just to clean it up. Now here I am using my cow, my pig, and my rooster, and I'm just stacking them on top of each other. And I will say that the transfer tape at this point can be a little tricky because the plastic from the trash can, when you spray paint and paint on top of it, it's not fully sealed to that plastic yet. And it could just be because I was being impatient and not letting it dry all the way. But I will say that using the transfer tape was a little bit tricky on this part using my cutouts. But again, being able to cut this out on the Cricut was pretty awesome because it was able to go really quick. And I ended up finding these little animals on their online site. So on one side, you can see that I've got my cow, my chicken, and my rooster. And then on the other side, I have got my star. And you can see as I'm pulling back that transfer tape that it did pull it up a little bit, but it was no worry because I just went back in and touched up that spot where it had a problem. And then for my letters, for my farmhouse letters, I'm gonna go ahead and just take those off and just stick them on into the place that I want, just because they're so big and bulky. I figured that those would transfer pretty easy. I definitely do like using the transfer tape when I do use the Cricut, just because it allows me to be able to get little tiny things on without having to reposition things like they should be. But these larger things, they're really great to be able to just pick it up without the transfer tape, and you still get the benefit of using the cutouts. So at this point, I'm now going to take a very small brush and I'm going to just go around the bucket, just like from our inspiration buckets that we saw, where there is this shiplap look to it. And I'm just going to make a nice thin line, a little bit messy because I like that look, and I'm just going to go all the way around. You could be more meticulous about this if you want to, but I really ended up loving how it had a little bit of thicker and thinner lines here and there as I went around. Now at this point, we need to figure out how to make some handles for our buckets, just like from the inspiration. So I'm taking these garden stakes. So I'm just going to cut them down to size. I need 4 of them, and you can see here that I'm kind of using my pliers to measure out the sides so that they're all the same bent length. And then once I've got the sides bent, I'm going to make sure that they're angled in just a tiny bit, not too much, because I wanted it to have the exact same look as the inspiration. So I'm bending them in, and then at this point, I'm going to take a pencil and I'm going to mark where I'm going to drill some holes. That way, so I don't have to struggle trying to cut through the plastic with a craft knife or anything like that. And now I'm just going to simply drill right through it. And I'm going to use my drill by going back and forth just a little bit to widen the hole so that the handle is going to be able to fit down in there nice and neat. Then once you've got those holes drilled, go ahead and slip in your handle. And then you're going to bend back the metal. Now I will say that these pieces of wire are pretty strong, so make sure you have a good pair of pliers, and once you've got it bent back, you can clamp it down into place and it doesn't move at all. They're strong, sturdy handles. And now I'm going to take some Mod Podge and seal the whole bucket, so that way it's all in there nice and sealed, not having any issues. If it gets scratched, the Mod Podge is going to make it really strong and have a beautiful finished look. I found this horse as inspiration online a while ago, and so I found this thrifted horse. It used to be a toy. It was in the toy section, and I knew right away that I could turn this into a really cool statued horse. I've been wanting one of these for a long time, and I just thought they would be so cool, and I definitely was not going to pay that $1,000. So I started by lessening the amount of hair that the horse had on it by cutting it in half, and then I gave it a haircut and pulled out all of that extra hair that was in there that I did not want, because we want to lessen the amount. That way when you go to mold it and shape it, you're not going to struggle with there being so much of it. And you could leave it long if your horse you find at your thrift stores has long horse hair. You're totally fine doing that, but I wanted mine to be a little bit shorter. I also did the same thing with the tail. I trimmed it, cut it in half, and then brushed on all the extra that I did not want to have in there so that I can shape it well. Now what we're going to do is we're going to take 1 part Mod Podge and then 1 part white paint, and we're going to mix it together really well, because we are going to massage this into the hair of the horse. This is going to allow it to be able to dry rock hard, and it's going to allow you to be able to shape it and keep the structure of it when you go to work on the next step after this part. So what you're going to do is you're just going to brush it in with a regular brush. I recommend using gloves because this part is really messy. So go ahead and put your gloves on, and then what I recommend is just taking the pieces of hair at certain strands and just keep playing with it and massaging it into place to get it to where you want. Once you've got it settled and you like the way it looks, go ahead and take that brush and add some more of that paint Mod Podge combo, and you're going to just lightly brush it over it, making sure that it's nice and pretty much caked on there so that when it dries, it's going to stick to the horse and it's going to be rock hard. And then you're going to do the same thing with the tail. Just position it where you want it to be and then add some more to make sure it was nice and sealed. So once you've got all of that in place and it's dried for quite some time, I would recommend letting it dry overnight. You want it to be really dry before we do the next part. You can see here that I'm tapping it, that it is rock hard, and I can touch it and it's not moving. We're going to take some spackle, and you can get this spackle at the Dollar Tree. This just happens to be a bigger tub that I have. And then we're going to start filling in those holes where the horse's hair is put into the horse's body and also down at its tail. And then we're going to start taking it with our hands and start smoothing it over the horse's body to give it that stone type texture to it. Just have fun with this. It can be messy. You can wear gloves again if you want to, but I like using my hands. It's just how I always do it here on my channel. And then you're just going to just rub it all over the whole horse's body. Make sure you get in all the spots so it looks consistent. Once that's all dry, you can take it outside and spray paint it a really dark gray color, and then you can start adding in the texture. I think this is the coolest part. This is where the horse really starts coming to life. What you're going to do is you're going to start taking lighter shades of gray and keep going over it, just dry brushing on those coats. You want to make sure each layer of those paints are showing through the really dark gray, the next medium gray, almost a grayish white, and then at the very end you're going to have almost a white. And you can see here that I'm adding in just a little bit of brown to give it that concrete stone look. And you don't want to lose the very dark color as the base. You just want to keep brushing it in to show all the texture and where it looks like stone, where it looks like it's been carved or it's been even molded by clay, whatever it is, that look that you're going for. This inspiration came from Antique Farmhouse. I love these crates, but I would not pay $89 for them. So we're going to use some supplies from the Dollar Tree, 2 of these chalkboard frames, and then 10 of these painter sticks that you can get from a home improvement store. And then we're going to simply start by putting 3 on the shorter side of the chalkboard frames. I put some hot glue down first, and then I used my staple gun and stapled it into place. So you can see I've got 3 on each of the shorter sides, and then on the bottom side I've got 4 more. So at this point it's created this cute, darling little crate, and completely on budget for a little bit under $3. Now I'm going to take some black paint, brown paint, and water, mix it all together to create a faux stain. And now I'm going to just simply paint that right onto the box itself, and it absorbs in, still showing the wood grain, and looks so much like the inspiration. Then I'm going to come in with some white paint and dry brush on it to distress it a little bit and make it look more rustic farmhouse, and then sand where I've got too much. And here it is, the inspiration versus mine, where I've saved a ton of money. This DIY's inspiration comes from Antique Farmhouse, one of my favorite online places, and I knew that we could make this pot for so much more affordable. Now they do give you 2 pots for the $42, but I'm gonna just use this tall bucket from the Dollar Tree that I picked up and I've had on hand. I took off the sticker on the bottom with my heat gun, and now I'm just unwrapping all of the twine they had around it, and then to take down the adhesive that it had stuck to the bucket and those little fibers, I just used my sanding block from the Dollar Tree. Now I'm going to use this wire that was left over from a project from last year. It had a star on it that I popped off. I always keep these types of wires because they're great for projects like this, and they're really strong, durable wires. So you can see here that I bent out 2 of the ends, and then I'm turning it into almost like a little rainbow arch. Now the best way to explain this is I'm going to bend it in so it looks like a handle on a dresser drawer. And then at the middle point, as if it was pushing into the dresser itself, I then make it become a frowny face. So you can see that the legs are coming out, and then there's the arch for the rainbow. So I did that twice, and then I'm going to line up where I want it to be able to go into my bucket for the inspiration picture. And I'm going to use my Crop-A-Dile and just punch out 2 holes. I love this tool, friends. I say it all the time. Everyone should have one of these in their craft room. They're so friendly to your hand if you have a hard time squeezing things. I love this tool. It goes through metal and plastic, all sorts of materials, wood. I love it. I've had mine for years and it is still holding up after like 10 years of having it. And then after that, I just put the wires, the ends that we bent in, I put those through the holes. I'm clamping them into place. And then I'm going to go ahead and just bend it and manipulate it into the spacing that I want it so it looks just like the inspiration. Now at this point it's ready to be painted. So I took it outside and I spray painted it a creamy ivory white. And then I'm now going to go with the colors for the inspiration. I will say that I ended up doing more of a sky blue versus a teal baby soft blue color. I wanted it to be more of a blue, sky blue color. So I'm coming in at the very top with the blue, and then I'm creating an ombre effect. So I'm blending in the white from the bottom and the blue from the top going into the middle. As I get to certain points that I like the way it looks, I come in with my heat gun to dry it, and then I keep blending more until I get that desired ombre. Really pretty. It almost reminds me of like the ocean and the sea foam that comes up with it. I just love how that looks so much on this bucket. Now I'm going to take a coal gray brown color and I'm going to just tap around it to give it that enamel look that the inspiration had. And I'm just going along the bottom, the handles, and the top. And then I'm going to bring in a toothbrush. My daughter asked me just the other day why I had a toothbrush in my craft room, and this is why, because I use a toothbrush to get that speckled paint look on my projects. And then to do the finishing touches, I'm just coming back in with some white and just creating some layers on this project. Now, can you believe this inspiration? I think it looks so much like it. Had I used more of a teal color, it would have been spot on, but I wanted more of a blue color to match my decor. $1 versus $42, and even if I only had 2 of them, that is still me saving a ton of money. My next look for less is going to be this mirror that I found over at Pottery Barn. I would never pay this price for this mirror just because even though it's beautiful, I think it's absolutely beautiful. I know that I could make it cheaper with some supplies from the Dollar Tree and a couple of sticks from Home Depot. So what I did was I picked up 12 mirrors, as you can see here, and I'm just taking these thin sticks. They are in the shape of a square, or I guess a really long rectangle, and I'm going to cut them down to the size that I need. So I laid out all my mirrors to get the gridding that I knew that I wanted, and now I'm taking my pencil and I'm just making my marks where I'm going to be cutting them. Here I am using my miter box, making all of my cuts. You're going to need 9 of these smaller cuts the size of the mirror's length, and then take your mirrors and you're going to rip off all the tabs on the back side because you want them to be laying flat on the surface we're going to be gluing them to. This is a really important step because if you don't, the glue will just not adhere properly to these mirrors. And I think that these are the greatest deal because they're $1 for each one and you cannot beat them. When I was buying them, in fact, every time I go to the Dollar Tree and I buy stuff, people look at me like I'm crazy because I buy multiples of things so that I can turn them into stuff like this. So here I am where I've got those shorter sticks, and then you're going to see in a second that I also have 2 longer sticks, and those longer ones are going to be in between each row. So I'm gluing down all the sticks, not the mirrors yet. I don't want to glue down the mirrors yet. I'm just trying to make sure I get all of my sticks all glued down first because we're going to be painting this a little bit later. So you can see here that I'm just testing it to make sure, and even the border around on the outside of the mirror, those are not glued down yet. I'm just using them as a buffer to know how much space that I'm going to be needing because I'm gluing everything down to a piece of foam core board. So here I am, I'm working on the next row. I'm gluing down 3 more of those sticks, checking to make sure the mirrors all fit, and then I'm coming back in with the really long one that's going down each row to connect everything together. And then once I've got those 2, I work on the very last one, making sure, again, everything is glued down and into place properly so that the mirrors, once again, they're gonna fit. You wanna make sure your mirrors are not gonna be, too tight in these spots, so just make sure you really take your time on this part. Then once you're all done, you can figure out how long you want to cut down these sticks. Now I used 2 long painter sticks and then these other pieces that I had from Home Depot, but you could technically use 4 if you take out one of those and have a 3x3 mirror. It would work and it would look super beautiful too. But I wanted to make sure that I did a 3x4 mirror so that you can see that it's longer and more substantial. And again, the price really just comes down to how many mirrors you want to put on these mirrors. You can make an even bigger one if you want to. So once you've got everything all glued into place and you've got all those corners all supported, go ahead and spray paint the whole thing black or paint it, whichever you prefer. And then you're going to take glue and glue in each corner and add a nice big amount in the center and then place in your mirrors. This inspiration I thought was so cute. I love the idea of using a little carton of eggs in my kitchen. I thought it would be really cute decor, or even throughout the whole year. There's so many different ways you can style this. So I am taking 3 canvases from the Dollar Tree. I'm going to take off the canvas. I like to keep the biggest part because I use that for other DIYs, banners and things like that. And then I'm going to just strip everything down to the frame itself and stack up 3 with some hot glue. Then I'm going to take these larger tongue depressor sticks that you can get from Walmart, and I'm going to cut them down because this is going to go on the bottom of our little egg crate. And I'm just going to put down some hot glue, and this is going to hold it really well in place. You could add some wood glue, but I've found that the hot glue does really well because these are both really porous pieces, so the hot glue kind of seeps in between these wood cracks. Then I'm going to come back in with those same long tongue depressor sticks, and I'm going to just cut them down to size to create the lining for the eggs to be able to sit in each one. So I've got 2 long ones and then I've got 3 shorter ones in between each row. I'm just simply measuring them, cutting them down to size, and I'm not going all the way down to the very bottom just because they're not long enough with the depth of how big it is. So I'm just cutting them down until they fit. Then I'm going to take some of these eggs that I had left over from Easter. I'm going to put them on some shish kebab sticks, and I'm going to take them outside and spray paint them all an ivory white color. And my crate, I spray painted it a white color. Now I'm bringing in my stain that I like to make, which is the little bit of black, some brown, and some water. I mix it all together, and I'm going to use that to distress it to give it more of a natural look that it's been sitting around for a long time, getting old and weathered. And then I'm going to take some of this mossy grass that you can get from the Dollar Tree and stuff that into all of my crate little openings for those eggs. After that, I'm going to put in my eggs, and it looks so much like the inspiration. I was so excited how this turned out and thought of all the really cute ways that I can decorate with this throughout my home, and I saved a ton of money making this myself. This DIY is a look for less project. Now, I could not believe that these were so expensive, and all it really is a couple of pieces of wood that are painted to look just like it. So I went ahead and cut those pieces outside from some old scrap wood that I happen to have on hand, and each one of the faces of these blocks are a different color. So I'm going to go with a white, and then a really pretty icy blue, and then the very last one is a tan color. I really love trying to color match. It's one of my favorite things to do when it comes to painting. So I'm just doing a really nice one coat on the front of these blocks because I wanted to have that rustic distressed look that you saw in the inspiration. And then for the very last one, I'm just adding in some more of the lighter color to make sure that it matches. Once I had that all painted, I came around on the back side with a really dark slate brownish gray color, and this looks just like the one from the inspiration. I'm just going to go all around all the sides and around the back, and then I did that on all of them so that they all had that same look. Now, this particular wood came from the wall between our living room and our kitchen when I ripped it down myself. So I have so much extra wood on hand all the time because of that one DIY that I did. And now I wanted to show you all, I know some of you are really nervous to hand letter paint, and some of you still don't have a cutting vinyl machine yet. So if you have stamps on hand, I like to use an acrylic block and acrylic stamps, and I'm just going to test it out first with the paint to make sure it's adhering smoothly to the acrylic stamp. And then I'm just going to stamp it right on. This is a great way to get lettering on your projects without feeling like you have to be really good at hand painting or buying a really expensive machine. Now, I will say I do love my big expensive machine, my Cricut, but I definitely want you to know that there are other options. So here I am, I'm going through and I'm stamping on all of their different quotes. And by the end, it looks exactly like the inspiration, and I did this project for free. So just know that there are so many fun projects out there that don't cost anything. For my next look for less inspiration, I'm going to be using this beautiful basket stand from Antique Farmhouse, and we're going to do it for a whole lot cheaper, about 10 bucks to be exact. I'm going to be using 4 of these baskets, gold baskets from the Dollar Tree, and then 4 of these mop poles, and then a whole bunch of zip ties. We use a lot of zip ties in this project. Now, one of my favorite things to get off these stickers really easy is just using this heat gun that I have. I'll link it down below if you're looking for a good heat gun. I love this one. I use it all the time. I'm going to heat up the sticker and then it peels off with no issues at all. Then I'm going to take 2 of those broom poles or mop poles, and I'm going to zip tie them up at the top of the basket. Now you're going to want to zip tie them as tight as you can and push down those little nubs when you've got it nice and tight. I would recommend you can see me cutting them here, but I would recommend, as I moved on with the project, I decided not to cut the ties off anymore so I could try to tighten things as I was getting things to the very end. So you can see here that moving forward, I'm not going to be cutting off those ends, just so I can keep adjusting them if I can find more ways to tighten it. Then I'm going to turn it around once I had it on both sides of that basket at the middle point of the basket, and then I'm going to do it the very next basket at the very bottom so I can create the framing. I measured out how high I wanted it to be up, and I marked so it was the perfect spot across the whole pole system, because you don't want to have one that's crooked or a little bit lower, because then your basket would be crooked. So now I'm going to take my drill. This part is so easy, I promise, friends. You can have someone help you if you don't feel comfortable with the drill, and you're simply going to drill in 4 holes going all the way through the pole on the top side and on the inside, so that you get all the way through so you can use your zip ties. And now what we're going to do is we are going to take our basket, and this part's a little wobbly because you still haven't tightened everything all the way, and as you add on more basket, it starts getting stronger and stronger. So you can see here that I'm adding on my poles. Now, a trick I learned is make sure you're coming on the side of the basket, not the inside of the basket. You can see that originally I was putting it on the longer part, and I decided, oh no, I need to put it on the actual ends of the basket so that the poles stay consistent in size all throughout, so you can get more baskets on it. Then I went and drilled out more holes where I wanted my next baskets to be, and then I just kept zip tying on more baskets. Now at this point, it's becoming stronger, but it's still not as strong as it could be. So I decided to add on another zip tie at the bottom part of the basket, and I'm going to zoom in just a second so you can see. But right here you can see that I'm coming down a little bit lower on that same joint where we put the first zip tie to hold the basket to the pole. I'm putting one down a little bit lower. But then I realized that the zip tie kept wanting to slide up, so I decided to take my pliers, and you can see if you bend it the wrong way, it'll still slide right off. I took my pliers and I bent out that wire just a little bit to create a little catch grip for the zip tie to be able to hold on to the basket. And then at this point, these baskets are on here so sturdy, and it really strengthened this whole basket tower organizer. Then at that point, I cut off all of the zip ties, and I took it outside and gave it a nice coat of white spray paint. Then I brought it back inside and I patched all of the holes and then painted over it. And then at this point, you can distress your basket however you would like. I decided to go really light on my distressing just because I didn't think that it needed too much, just for the look I was going for with my house and kind of going off the inspiration. But you could paint these baskets whatever color you want. Could you just imagine what you can do? Now, at the very end, I decided not to put the sign up at the top because I'm going to be using this probably in my bathroom to organize a bunch of toiletries. But friends, can you even get over the savings? This cost me about $10 to $11 because of all the zip ties, but I saved so much money, and it looks identical to what the inspiration was. I was online the other day and came across this darling dairy jug that was made so simply out of just wood pieces that I knew that I could replicate myself and save tons of money on. So I took some wood that I had on hand in my garage that was left over from when I tore down the wall between our kitchen and our living room. And first I sketched out a notch that I wanted for the sides of the jug, and then I cut them out with my jigsaw. Then using my larger saw, I took it over to the ends and cut off the size that I would need for it. I repeated this twice for the 2 outer sides of that jug, and then there's one straight cut in the middle. Now I'm going to be using a thinner piece of wood that I also had on hand that a friend gave to me when she was cleaning out her garage, and I'm just cutting those down to size to be able to wrap it 3 times around the jug. at the bottom, at the middle where the handles come down, and then at the very top. Now my inspiration didn't have it wrapped around the top, but I just liked it because it made it look more like a cap on the container, the milk jug. I just thought that that looked really cute, and to personalize it myself. Now it's really important to remember to always sand down things like this because there's always lots of splinters whenever you're working with wood. So I sanded everything down nice and smooth on the ends and those notches where I cut them out. And now I'm adding on some wood glue and some hot glue. These are going to be cased with those surroundings around them 3 times. So you don't need a lot of glue, just a little something to hold it together before you start nailing everything together. Then I'm going to go ahead and glue on those 2 smaller pieces on the sides first. And then I'm going to bring back on the long piece on the top. So again, the wood glue is going to really help it lock in, and then the hot glue is just going to hold it in place for a little bit of time while things dry and get settled. This is such an easy DIY. I could not believe that they wanted $70 for this. And at this point, basically everything is free because I'm just using wood that I had in my garage. I know a lot of us have wood like this, and a lot of us have these types of tools in our garage, so I just wanted everyone to see that with a little bit of creativity, you can make the cutest things ever. So then I went ahead and nailed it all in place around those holding brackets on it, and then I went outside, I spray painted a creamy ivory white, and then using a really brown, grayish, dark color. I don't know what color to call this, but it's kind of a gray and a brown combined. And I'm just going to go ahead and paint over all of those wrapped around brackets on the milk jug or the dairy jug. Now at this point, I'm just going to take my smaller thin brush and some black paint after I sketched on what I wanted it to say. And I'm going off of the inspiration picture. So first I'm doing the really big words dairy. And then I'm going to do certified fresh. And then at the very end, down at the bottom, you're going to make sure you have enough spacing to be able to do these 3 rows. And just have fun with this part. I say it all the time here on my channel. You don't have to have perfect handwriting. If you don't feel comfortable doing this with paint, you can always end up using vinyl cutting machines. But at the very end, I did milk, cream, and butter and had stars in between them. After the paint was all really dried well, and I used my heat gun just to make sure that it was, I came in with my sanding block from the Dollar Tree, and I'm just going to simply sand the whole thing down. Now, this is the one part where I actually spent money. I picked up one of these cutting mats from the Dollar Tree. I'm going to sand it down to make sure it's nice and textured on it so the paint will adhere to it. Once I sanded it on both sides, I went ahead and cut out 2 strips that were thick enough to resemble the handles on the jug. And then I took them outside and I spray painted them black. And now I'm coming back in with the same grayish brown color that I was using earlier to go around the jugs. And I added a little bit of white to it. And then I'm just going to nail that into place on the jug, coming around the sides like the handles and the inspiration. And we have a completed finished project. I think this turned out so great, and for $2 I made it versus $70. This project's inspiration came from Home Depot, where I saw this really cute basket that was black and white stripe, and I knew that we could make it so much more affordable than what they were asking for the $40. So I picked up one of these floor mats or outdoor mats, rugs from the Dollar Tree, and then some rope. And I'm going to take a plate, and you can definitely make this bigger. You can see that you can use 2 mats to make an even bigger basket. I'm using a smaller one just to show you how to make it. So you're going to take a plate the size that you want, cut out a circle, and then put the plate to the side, and then you're going to decide how much you're going to need to be able to wrap around that circle base. Then you're going to go ahead and cut out with your scissors along that gridded line, and you're going to see that the mats from the Dollar Tree have these lines that are very easy to follow along. Cut out the length and the height that you would like, and then you're going to take your circle and you're going to glue it right onto that longer piece. And you're going to continue to add a nice amount of hot glue, making sure it's getting on both sides of the circle and casing it around that circle bottom. Now this part is so easy. It really just takes a little bit of time making sure that everything is drying. So be patient as you're holding it, making sure that everything is gluing properly so you don't have any weird bumps or any issues with it buckling on you later on down the road. The better you glue it, the better the basket will hold up. So here I am, I'm at the very end, and I'm just wrapping around that last little bit at the bottom, and you can see that I'm really holding things in place as I'm allowing it to dry. If you could hear the audio, you would hear me like blowing on it, trying to get it to dry quicker. So just make sure you take your time to allow it to really bond and dry well. Then up at the top, I went ahead and glued the sides together, and then I used some of these clamps from the Dollar Tree to be able to lock it into place and allow it to really dry nice and sturdy at the top. Now I decided to switch to a different rope because originally I thought, oh, it would be kind of cool to do brown, and then I really wanted to stick with that black and white look. So I pulled out some of my white nautical rope from the Dollar Tree. And the best part about this project is that the rope perfectly fits between the grooves on the mat. So I'm just allowing the rope to fall in between that divot down on the mat, and then you're going to see the black being perfectly spaced in between the white rope, so you can see the black and white stripe really well on this basket. Now you're going to just continue to go around and around, and on the back side you're going to have to bump up to the next layer. So on the back side of the mat, you're going to see that there's a little bit of a wave to get up to the next layer as you keep wrapping. On the very bottom, I went ahead and wrapped around to add some more sturdiness to the basket, and then I added on some handles, and I'm taking a couple of thin strips of the mat to conceal the seam of the inside of the handle to really clean up the look of it and to make it look more high end. And I'm going to just use a lot of hot glue on that to really bind it in there so that the handles are strong. And then I'm going to use my little clamps again from the Dollar Tree and clamp it down into place to allow it to really have a chance to dry and be strong and sturdy. And I did that on both sides of the handles, and after you're all done, you can put whatever you want in this because it's actually waterproof on the inside with it being an outdoor mat. I personally think we saved so much money because instead of paying $40, I paid about $4 in my supplies. My inspiration for this next look for less came from Antique Farmhouse. I loved these beautiful wall geometric art pieces, but I did not want to pay the price. So I found some of these mirrored frames at the Dollar Tree. I'm going to be actually only using 3 of them, but I'm showing that I was able to find 4. And you're going to go ahead and remove the packaging and then remove the screws from the back side. There are, I think, 8 screws on this, and I just used a little tiny eyeglass kit screw remover to be able to take all those screws out. Then I took it outside and I spray painted it white, and you can see that we're going to be using some of these jumbo tongue depressor sticks that I pick up from the Dollar Tree. I need 8 of them, as well as some shish kebab sticks. Now I'm going to be cutting them down to size because we want to make a little bit of a stronger base for our larger tongue depressor sticks to be able to bond to. So we're adding these shish kebab sticks in here to be able to really give a bigger base for our wood to go around it. You can see that I cut it down to size and I'm gluing it to the part where the screws used to go into. Once those were all in place, I went ahead and cut off the rounded tips of the larger tongue depressor sticks, and now I'm just going to bring the corners together. I'm going to do 2 like that, and then I'm going to have 2 be a little bit longer because you want to be able to make sure that everything is nice and strong and secure, especially if you're going to be displaying it in your home. I really do try to find ways to make things look really high end without them looking like we made things from the Dollar Tree. Then you can see that I'm starting to put them on the corners, and with a lot of hot glue, I'm making sure that things are gluing really well. But before I glue this longer piece down where I hadn't cut down the sides, I wanted to make sure I got the sizing right. Now I'm going to add on all of the glue. I'm going to come into those corners and then onto those shish kebab sticks that we had earlier. And you can see here that it's really giving it a bigger surface to be able to bond to the frame. Then just make sure you push down really hard, wipe off any of that extra glue that might be pushing out from it. And then once it's all dry, you're going to flip it over, and then I'm using brown paint, a little bit of black paint, and some water to create a stain. And I'm just going to go along the edge. And you could technically use painter sticks that are longer so you don't have all these seams, but I promise you the finished look looks so farmhouse, so cute. It looks very rustic in my personal opinion. So I just went with these tongue depressor sticks because I knew I could get the look and look really beautiful at the same time. So I'm coming in with my faux stain, and I'm just going to go over all of those sticks, making sure I'm not getting any on the white frame itself. And then I'm also going to do the back side just so when people turn it over, it looks finished on the back side. I always like to make sure both sides look good. And then once that was all dry, I came back in with some white paint and dry brushed on some white paint. And this is the part where I said it's going to look so farmhouse that you won't even notice those sticks, and we're saving tons of money doing it this way. And now I'm going to come in with some brown, and I'm going to dry brush on the white spray paint. And can you believe it? Look at this savings. I ended up spending about $2 on each frame. I wouldn't even say that. I would say I probably spent about $1.25 on each frame. If you are new to my channel, welcome. My name is Heidi Sonboul, and I'm so grateful you stopped by. I actually have 4 channels here on YouTube, and I'll link them all down below so you can check them out for the ones that you're interested in. But please do give this video a thumbs up and click the subscribe button if you like what you see here on my channel. This next look for less, I was dying when I saw this price. I cannot believe that this was being sold for $49 and on sale $39, because the Dollar Tree actually carries succulents starting around this time of year. They're $1 for each one of these stems. I picked up some of this Spanish moss and then this white bowl over in their kitchen section. All of these together were so much cheaper than what they were selling it for at Pottery Barn, and I think it is a good knockoff if you love a succulent look in your home for plants. So take a regular pair of scissors that you know are starting to almost be out the door, that you don't mind using for some cutting on plastic. Cut next to the edge and just take your time staying as close as you can, and then cut off the handles. They actually cut off pretty easy. I'm showing you in real speed how quickly they come off. And then you're going to take some foam squares and you're just going to glue them down to the bottom of that container. Then you're going to take some moss, you're going to pull it apart, massage it some, because when it's in the packaging it's kind of all balled up really tight to fit in there. So just pull it apart, and then you're going to hot glue it down over the styrofoam so that you don't have it fall out over time. Then you're going to simply take your succulents and you're going to just poke them down into the styrofoam. Again, can you see why I said I was shocked at how much they were charging for that plant? So they sell succulents on Pottery Barn, and they had this one I'm holding right here. They sell 3 of those for $20. I think that's what it was, might have been $25. If you buy them from the Dollar Tree, you can buy 3 for $3. So Go pick up some succulents. It's totally worth it. For this next look for less is another beautiful sign from the Antique Farmhouse store online. I love their store, but I just would not pay $16 for a 4x4 size artwork. So I created a printable for all of you. I will link that down below in my description box so you can get that really easy. And then all we're gonna do is we're gonna take one of these signs from the Dollar Tree. I had this on hand from last fall, and I just simply peeled off the original artwork, took off the little hang-up bracket that they had on it, and now I'm taking off the sticker. Once I had everything removed, I went ahead and took it outside. I spray painted a really pretty gray color. I actually decided to go with a gray versus doing the wood from the inspiration because I just felt like it matched my decor a little bit better. But you can paint it whatever color you want, or you can have a faux wood look as well. So here's the printable. I cut it down to size to fit inside of my 4x4 box. Then I put some hairspray on it first to make sure it really bonded the ink to the paper. And once it was dry, I went ahead and took my Mod Podge, and I'm just really gluing it down nicely to it. Once that was in place, I went ahead and created a cute little bow because, again, I'm just customizing it to make it look like my own. But this project cost me a dollar, and look at how much we saved versus the inspiration. Right now, I'm going to be using my jigsaw as well as 2 pieces of this wood that I picked up from my local home improvement store. They were about $1.50 for each one, and we're going to turn them into a really cute sign that is a look for less project. I start by taking my tape measure and I'm measuring out the length of the whole thing, finding the half point, and then creating my cut line. You're going to see my tape measure fall to the side, but I still was able to get a clean straight line. So then once I had that, I went ahead and had my husband hold the other side because, friends, I need to work on my wood cutting area. This is my janky way I do it, but I definitely would recommend clamping it down. Then I brought it inside, and now I'm just going to sand down those rough edges where I just used my jigsaw to make sure everything's smooth so that I won't get any splinters while I'm working with it, or anybody when they pick it up. Then I'm going to take it and lay out the pieces how I want them to look. And then with a whole bunch of these handles that I'm always cutting off of my long painter sticks, I'm going to use these as supports on the back to bring all the pieces together and have a nice clean look on the back side. I used some glue, by the way, before I stapled them down. And then I flipped it over, and I'm going to use water and a teal color paint first, because I'm trying to match the color that was on our inspiration that was really expensive. I love doing these kind of look for less dupes because it's amazing how much stores charge for things when all you have to do is just have the right tools and you can make pretty much anything you see at a store. So now I'm coming back in with some more of a limey or green color to get that distressed look. And as it dried, it gave it the most beautiful green color. Now I'm coming back in with some dry brushing of white paint to really bring up that wood grain. And then I'm going to come back in with some brown and distress all along the edges to give it that farmhouse weathered look. At that point, I was pretty happy with how it looked. And now I'm going to take my large ruler, and with as straight line as possible, I'm going to create my Choose Happy letters with a pencil. I like using a pencil because it doesn't bleed through the white paint whenever I use it. And I'm just taking my time to get the letters that I like. Once I was all done sketching those out, I came back in, and I'm now just going to go over it with my white paint. Now friends, I just want to encourage you all to love your homes. Take the time to make it feel like you, and make it feel like a safe landing place for your family members, those that visit, friends. I just think our homes are a space that should always represent us, especially in this world that just seems so crazy. And I think it's one of the reasons why I was so drawn to this Choose Happy, because I truly believe that it's that state of mind where we choose to be happy and we keep moving forward and we keep finding that sunshine that God provides us. Once it was all dry, I came back in with my sanding block from the Dollar Tree and I just sanded it up just a little bit. And then after that, it was all done. Can you believe this? We made this for $3 versus $47.99. For this inspiration, I loved this planter, but it even sold out for $48. I could not believe that, friends. Oh, we're going to do it for so much less. So I'm going to take this container that I got from the Dollar Tree and I'm going to just take off the sticker. And then using my Crop-A-Dile Big Bite, this is the larger version of the smaller Crop-A-Dile tool you see me use here a lot on my channel. I'm going to just punch holes because this thing goes through wood, metal, plastic, and it does a fantastic job. You could also use a drill and drill out the holes if you wanted to. And I'm going to just go around until I've created my holes. My holes are about an inch apart from each other. And once I've gone all the way around, it's ready to take outside and spray paint white. So at this point, I'm going to use this hula grass skirt that they have at the Dollar Tree. I actually like this a lot. I always buy a bunch of these whenever they come out because you end up getting a lot for what is in the pack for just $1. Then I'm going to just simply take some of the strands from that hula skirt, the raffia, and I'm just going to weave it through my bucket. Now there are so many different ways to weave these through the holes. On the inspiration, they actually skipped the middle hole and did more of a V versus going to a side angle like I'm doing here. I actually liked my pattern more than what the original one was, and I didn't want the raffia going up around the top lip of the bucket. Again, this was my preference on how I did it, but it's very easy to recreate the pattern that they had on the inspiration over at Antique Farmhouse. So once you've gone all the way around, you're going to want to make sure that they're secured on the inside. So make sure you end up in a spot inside the bucket where you're able to tie your knot and secure it. You could also use some hot glue, but too much hot glue can melt the raffia pieces. I've actually had that happen before. So here's the inspiration and here's mine. For this DIY, I am using a Look for Less inspiration that cost $118 from Antique Farmhouse. Now I love Antique Farmhouse, but their prices are really high, and I knew that with some scrap wood that I had in my garage, I could make this. So I've got 4 small sizes, 4 medium and 4 large. I'm going to put the measurements down below in my description box if you decide to try to make this project. Then I'm going to take some wood glue and some hot glue, and I'm going to glue on 2 of the smaller pieces to the medium pieces, creating a long rectangle frame. Then to make sure that they're locked in place, I'm going to add my staples to the back. I'm just going to do 2 of them to make sure they're nice and locked in. And now we're going to start building the cased out frame around it. So I took my glue and I went down the center of those last 2 small pieces. This is where we get our 4 pieces in, and I'm going to just take my staple gun and do a simple staple right in there. Make sure that's locked and held into place as well. Once I have those all in place, I then can start bringing around the sides. Make sure those staples, by the way, are really in so it doesn't cause any issues when you put on this next piece. Then I just glued that all into place, added a couple staples again to make sure it's nice and strong. And now at this point, I have tons of these wires left over. They're from the garden stakes that have cute little bees or sunflowers on them. I'm always ripping them off and turning them into other things. And so I decided to repurpose these wires. I've been holding on to them for a while. And what I'm doing is I'm just cutting them down to the sizes that I want, and I'm bending the ends so that I can use those for my staple gun to be able to connect and catch onto. And you can see here that I've got 2 arches on the outside. This is where it's just a little bit different than what the inspiration was, because I didn't have wires long enough to be able to do 2 in the middle. So I've got 3 going horizontal. So you can see that in the inspiration there's 4 and 4 on that one, but that's okay. Like, that's the thing about these inspirations, that you get them and you customize them to make them look the way you want them to look. So once I had all of my wire pieces all stapled into place and they were locked in really tight, I went outside and spray painted the whole thing with a creamy ivory white. And now I'm going to come back in with my dry brushing, and I'm just going to distress it lightly. It's actually distressed less than what the inspiration was, but again, that's the fun part about the inspiration and making it yourself. You get to make it how you want. Now, this was absolutely free for me to make, and I saved myself $118. My Look for Less project is coming from Josh in Maine. They were selling these for about $15, not on sale. And I know that we can make them for pennies, super cheap, super affordable, and the look is identical. So you're going to go ahead and take some black foam core board, cut it down to size. I did a 5x7 size, and then for the corners I just matched it up on my cutting mat, and then from corner to corner in the box I cut a nice line on both top corners of my tag. Then to create the hole for your rope, you're going to take the ruler circle that you saw there, and you're just going to cut around after you've traced it. Then once you've got everything all cut out, you're going to go ahead and paint it. Now I'm going for that chalkboard look, and how I do that with paint is I mix cream with black. It has more of a slate gray color versus using white and black. I feel like it looks a little more washed out. Once the paint is all dry, I'm then going to take my pencil and I'm going to sketch on the number for our family members. So I'm going to do number 5. I thought this would be so cute year-round to display somewhere in my home, on a shelf, on a table, but I just love the way it looks. And this is the thing, friends. I know that so many people have crickets or silhouettes, but there are a lot of people who still don't have them. I have them in my home, and I'm so grateful to have them, and I feel very blessed to have them, but I want everyone to see that if you don't have a super fancy cutting machine, using paint and a fine tip paintbrush is all you need, because you can get the same look. And you know, maybe in the beginning you'll feel, you know, that painting it by hand is a little tricky, but the more you practice, the more you keep painting and trying, the better and better and better you're going to get at it. And I just keep playing with it until I get the look that I want. And the other tip is whenever you're painting white on black, sometimes the black can bleed through a little, so I'm making sure I go over it a few times to make sure that it's nice and crisp looking. I like it when it's got that nice crisp white look on the slate gray. And then at the N and the O, I'm just taking my time because they're smaller letters. And then the little dot, I'm just going to flip my brush around and tap on a little dot with the end of my brush. So again, don't feel intimidated with having to go out and buy machines to be able to create this look. You can paint them by hand and save yourself even more money, and this really is a super cheap project to do and has such a cute impact on your decorative shelves. Now I'm going to take some brown paint and I'm going to simply just tap a couple corners here and there to give it that rustic look, as if it's been weathered by the salty air. And then to go along with that coastal farmhouse look, I'm going to take some of this nautical rope that I picked up from the Dollar Tree. I slipped it through, looped it, and then I'm twisting it back together and tying a knot at the top. And then to continue on with that nice weathered beachy feel to it, I'm going to just fray out the tips of the rope. Now this rope came from the Dollar Tree as well as the other supplies that I'm going to be using in this video, but I love this rope because there are 3 ropes twisted together, and when you untwist it, it triples the value of this rope. So it's a really great rope. You can use it really thick or you can lessen it. Now I decided to do one more version of these tags just to show you all that these have so much potential. I think they're so cute to put around your home. I'm going to take some more white paint, and see here, I'm not doing any pencil sketches on it. I'm just freehanding this, and this has just come with time of me practicing and just enjoying painting letters and numbers by hand. So I'm just going to take my time and just write out the word welcome, and again, feel free to write it with pencil first and then paint it on. Now a fun tip is to take the greenery that you can get from the Dollar Tree, and this is how I create a mini vine from the Dollar Tree. They have these leaves on them. They have all colors, pink, blue, white, yellow, and these leaves are so cute, and when you glue their tips together you can create a vine. So I'm just gluing them together to create a little wreath. I'm going to add on a lace bow. This lace is also from the Dollar Tree, and then I'm going to add on another one of those ropes to give it that nautical feel, but yet have that farmhouse flair that I think so many of us love. And then I'm going to distress it once again with that brown paint to give it that rustic, beachy, weathered, salty air look. For this next inspiration, again, it comes from Antique Farmhouse, a site I love. They wanted $112 for these frames. That is so much money. We're going to make them for so much less. I have these printables here to share with you all today. We're going to be using the white hydrangea pictures. If you missed it, last week I had a printable that had the blue hydrangeas. I'm going to link that video at the end of this video so you can check it out, and down below in my description box. But what we're going to do is we're going to take 2 frames from the Dollar Tree, and we're going to take our printable and we're going to cut it down to size to fit inside the frame. Now you can stop there and make it as easy as can be by just putting these pictures into the frame, or we can try to match the colors that were in the inspiration. So I went outside, I spray painted them an ivory creamy white, and then after that was all nice and dry, I came back in and dry brushed on brown and white to give it that blonde wood color that is very popular right now in farmhouse home decor. It was so easy to do, and we're going to save ourselves so much money. Now I will say the inspiration frames were a lot bigger, and they do have bigger frames at the Dollar Tree. I've seen them before. This is just what I had on hand. And even still, we saved ourselves so much money. Don't forget to grab the free printable. It's linked down below. It'll take you to my website where you can download it for free. Thanks so much for watching today's video. It really does mean so much to me each and every single time you click on one of my videos. I'm going to recommend a couple videos over here to the side that might interest you as well. And please do leave a comment down below to let me know which one you liked and which one you think you will try. And if you haven't already, please do give this video a thumbs up. And until the next episode, bye friends!